What book?
Luke raised his eyebrow at me. I cleared my throat. I found a book hidden upstairs. It was written in the same language as the markings through the house.
And you didn't tell us. Why?
Charlie was angry. The black of his irises expanded until the whole of his eye was pitch black.
What if that was the key?
I found myself stuttering as I backed away from him. His body was slowly changing. The soft, pale flesh of his hands turned black as the darkness crept up his arms. The long black locks that usually hung messily from his head rose up, no longer bound by gravity. Swirls of smoke-colored ink covered his face. He no longer looked like anything he had ever shown me before. Ebony claws dug into the arms of the chair where his fingers once were.
Charlie, will you at least let her explain herself?
Charlie let out a feral growl as saliva dripped off his razor-sharp fangs.
I have been stuck here for centuries.
He sprung from his seat and pounced me, one clawed hand wrapping around my throat, lifting me dangling into the air. His body crackled and shivered with rage and the pain that radiated up from his body from his feet, which were firmly planted on the floor.
A few measly 100 years should be nothing to you. Put her down.
Charlie glared into my eyes as I grasped his wrist, struggling to breathe. His fangs receded into his maw, his angry sneer pulling down into a pain-filled frown. He leaned into me, his nose pressed into my cheek as his hot words hit my ear.
Know my pain.
The room spun around me. I could hear Luke shouting at Charlie. They'd wake up Rory if this continued. I didn't wish Rory to see his beloved Charlie like this. The familiar and once comforting static filled me. I felt as though I was floating. Luke was screaming now. I saw nothing but darkness. I felt nothing. I lay suspended in void for what seemed like an eternity. Small lights like fireflies sparked into being and danced around me. I reached my hand out and touched one. The tiny light floated above my palm. Crow, I whispered. I watched as the light in my palms and those around me grew and spread into the cosmos. Beautiful rainbow-colored nebulae swirled and tumbled in the air. Some of the lights collided, causing explosions of stars. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I was not alone. I stood back to back in a small tight circle with 4 others. We watched in awe how the beautiful lights danced. One raised his arm and pointed at a small cluster of light. Floating toward the small universe, I recognized it as my own. As life began, another of the beings flicked his fingers, and the gods were born. We watched as they molded man, some from clay, others their own flesh. Man grew and bowed to their gods. We watched, fascinated, always watching, never touching, until one bloody day we walked among you. We ate of your food, smelled your air, touched your hearts, tasted your fear. We never stayed anywhere long. When people saw us for what we were, they either ran screaming or tried to kill us. Though we lusted after your emotions, we? I shook myself. What is happening?
Watch.
I saw the worlds through Charlie's eyes. Humans were like playthings to them. One of his siblings tore the limbs from one tiny human to see what would happen. He seemed surprised that the human died, but became excited over the fear of the others. Death, it seemed, was our greatest fear. So they played on it, watching, rarely interfering, taking from us little bits here and there. As the world changed, the gods abandoned us. Wars were fought. times forgotten. Charlie and his kin sat back curiously, waiting to see what we would do. Then Charlie took the man in the gray house on Griffin Drive. Suddenly he was stuck, and like a lost child, he felt his own fear for the first time. So used to watching everything at once, he was now limited to the view outside the 3 little windows he could see through. All he had now was time, and it passed slowly. His anger and rage was directed at his siblings, who watched his plight and did nothing. What would happen to a nameless one that lived amongst the humans for too long? Would he ever ascend to the heavens again? Or would he continue to slowly change into a being trapped between worlds? Tears ran down my face.
Why do you cry? I need not your pity.
I reached my hand out in the darkness and found his face. Charlie, this feeling you have, this is called loneliness. My voice echoed around us as my fingers ran down his neck and chest, stopping at the spot where a human heart would be. This is heartbreak.
No, I don't feel silly emotions like a wretched human.
You aren't alone anymore, Charlie. Light returned to me then. Luke was still screaming at Charlie. Had only a fraction of a second passed? Charlie set me down gently, though he still glared.
Moira, come here! Get away from him!
Luke was positively rabid.
Since when do you care so much?
I spat at Luke. I didn't mean it to come out as angry as it had, but I was currently filled with both Charlie's and my own emotions. I might as well have slapped Luke, judging by the look he gave me now.
That's my child, too.
He scowled at me. Oh, right. I vomited everywhere for the millionth time. I spent the next few hours explaining myself to both Charlie and Luke. I told them about the library searches, and finally about Faust and Mr. Lore. When I mentioned Mr. Lore, I noticed the men exchange a quick glance at each other. Apparently they had heard of him. Rory had gotten fed up with the lack of attention paid him at that point and begged for PB&Js. We pulled our little table half out of the house again and ate at it like a family. I laughed so hard at that thought I choked on the sandwich. 2 humans, just babies compared to the nameless one at the head of the table and the devil at the foot. Luke did not like being called the devil. I got a long and lengthy lecture on how the devil and Satan are titles in hell. Luke had broken free of his chains a millennia ago and no longer held either title.
I also am not the cause of everyone's problems, and I don't make anyone do anything.
Luke was a little red in the face.
I may plant seeds of thought into a person's head, like seeing something from a different perspective or a different way to go about doing something. But it's up to them to fertilize the seed and let it grow, or pluck out the thought. I never force anyone to do a damn thing.
Charlie grinned.
Seeds, you say? Like the time you crossed America planting apple seeds?
Luke balked and blushed.
So I was feeling a little spiteful at the moment. Humans tend to believe the forbidden fruit was an apple, so I thought I'd give my father the finger by planting a shit ton of his tree of knowledge.
Luke smirked.
It didn't quite go over like I thought it would. And by the way, I was not the one to tempt Eve with the damn forbidden fruit. Even the Bible says it was a serpent. Why does everyone always blame me for that shit?
Of course it wasn't you.
Charlie snickered.
One of my brothers took the serpent that day.
His snickering grew to laughter.
We wondered what would happen if they ate of the fruit.
Luke stared slack-jawed at Charlie while he chortled.
It was more amusing than we thought. You should have seen what happened when another brother took one of Odin's children for a spin.
Luke slammed his fists on the table. Rory jumped and let out a squeal of fright. "Wook, you scared me! Don't wake it!" That night, as I sang Rory to sleep, I wondered how much human life had been altered by the meddling of the curious nameless ones. I dreaded going to sleep. What horrors would haunt me tonight? Instead, I dreamt of a beautiful garden and apples. The craving grew so strong I woke up from my slumber. As I padded downstairs and into the kitchen, I overheard Luke and Charlie whispering at the door. Pressing myself against the wall, I inched closer to eavesdrop.
"Let me take them,"
Luke was whispering.
"No, there'll be a bigger chance someone else will see them. You could make it worse." "And what happens when he finally finds out?" "I haven't eaten anyone in a long time."
"Charlie, that could implicate Moira?" I swallowed hard and stepped out of the shadows. "Sorry, I couldn't help myself." "What are you sneaking around the house for?" Luke crossed his arms. "I'm hungry. I kept dreaming about apples." Charlie laughed as Luke rolled his eyes. "What are you guys talking about?" They both went tight-lipped. Putting my hands on my hips, I raised an eyebrow at them. Still, they remained silent. Charlie looked thoughtful for a moment and pursed his lips.
"John is looking for you."
"Charlie, I thought we agreed." Luke tried to slap at Charlie, only to be met with a zap from the barrier. I felt faint and nauseous. No. He couldn't find us. He could take Rory away. He could have me arrested for kidnapping. He could notice I was pregnant. He could kill us both. I turned from the men and went upstairs. I would just move us again. I didn't know where, but I could just pick up and go. Except I didn't have a car this time, and taking a bus was too risky. Anything that I had to show for our identification was out. John would know the minute I bought a ticket. John was a cop after all. It's not that I thought all cops were bad. Most of them are amazing people, putting their lives on the line to keep complete strangers safe. No, the problem was, if I told anyone about what happened, or what I feared really happened with my mom, well, who would they believe? A teenage runaway that technically kidnapped her baby brother? Or a trusted and seasoned detective? Who knew what he had told people had really gone down? He may have beat me and raped me, but I didn't go quietly. As much as I'd love to have heard how he explained the scratch marks down his face, or the bite marks on his arm, I'd rather just not see him ever again.
"Moira,"
Charlie called quietly up the stairs.
"Moira, come down here."
If I didn't go down, Charlie would just get louder and wake up Rory. So I acquiesced to his request. "I've got to pack, Charlie. I don't have time to talk." I was feeling sick again. He walked with me back to the door Luke stood at. "You aren't going anywhere," said Luke. "Charlie was right. The more people that see you, the higher the risk. I can't have him mistaking my child for his." Of course, that's what Luke was worried about. He promised he'd have some of his men run around the country dropping off false leads. I only hoped that would keep John busy until he just gave up. Do you ever say to yourself, "It can't get any worse," and then instantly the universe starts laughing? It was probably 2 weeks later, just before Rory's 3rd birthday, when I heard back from Faust. We'd played the most insane game of phone tag using the grocery store's phone when Miss Judy thrust a prepaid phone in my hand. "Sweetheart, for heaven's sake, use this phone. Besides, if me or Missy need to get a hold of you, it'll be a lot easier with the phone. Now, I paid the first month, you just gotta pay the rest. I gave your friend the number, so she'll call it now." Her eyes drifted down to my belly, which was just starting to swell the tiniest bit. "Miss Judy, thank you so much. I'll pay you back for the phone. How much was it?" "Don't you worry about it." "Moira?" Her eyes stayed fixed to my stomach. "Yes?" "Oh, never mind me."
You bring Rory by my house again soon and have yourself some downtime.
The phone rang in my hand on my walk home. Hello?
Moira?
Faust?
We've got a problem.
What sort of problem? I asked Faust.
The book is disintegrating. It's just falling apart and turning to ash. A friend was able to read some, and Moira, it's even worse. According to what we were able to read before the book started vaporizing, the script is permanent.
She was talking fast, and I could hear slight panic in her voice. What do you mean? Faust, I don't understand. The book, it was fine. I took it to the library and everything.
I know. I am so sorry, Moira. All we can figure is the script you said was all over the room. It must have been protecting the book, too. Fuck. Moira, I am so sorry. I could bring it back, but I don't think I'd make it in time.
It's permanent?
In order for the script to act as it has, the priest must have followed a ritual that was outlined in the book. It said something like it would last for an eternity.
How? I could feel my breath catching in my throat, and the world started to spin. I sat down on the curb I had stopped at to answer the phone. Rory watched curiously. How do I get Charlie out?
I don't know. I'm worried if we handle the book more, it'll be a pile of dust. Half the book is gone now, but we put it in a box to try to preserve the rest. I'm so sorry, Moira. I really am.
It's not your fault, Faust. If you ever find a way to read the rest...
I'll call you.
With that, we ended the call. My chest tightened and squeezed my lungs. The world was closing in on me. Moima sick? Rory tugged my sleeve. I couldn't answer. My breathing hitched, and I began to wail. Charlie was going to kill me. He'd be stuck in that house forever because I moved the book. Even if Faust was right and there was no way to remove the script, Charlie would never forgive me. I put my head between my knees and sobbed. Rory climbed from his wagon, hugged my arm, and patted my head. My hysteria was beginning to calm a little when I heard a car pull up and the sound of a window roll down.
Moira, everything all right?
It was the giant man from the grocery. Probably the same bear of a man that left the note with Mr. Lore's number on it in the first place. He pulled his lifted Jeep to the side of the road and climbed out. The body of the car rose a significant amount once it was free of the massive man it had contained. He sat beside us on the curb.
What's wrong, child?
I don't know why, but I told him everything. Every last dirty little detail, from the last night at John's all the way to the phone call with Faust, poured from my mouth as that giant of a man rubbed my back. When I was done spewing out my dark secrets, I finally raised my eyes to his face. His long dark hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, a few loose strands dangling in his face, brushing his snub nose. Dense stubble covered his awkwardly wide and square jawline. Ancient smile crinkles surrounded his almond-shaped eyes. He reminded me of a kindly, cuddly boar, though I imagined he'd be terrifying when angry. He looked out at the empty lots across from us in a still, thoughtful manner. Taking a deep breath, he turned to me.
You are a good girl, Moira. Though your heart is heavy, it remains pure. You could have easily left your brother behind and disappeared. Instead, you chose to take him from a bad situation, even though you knew you would struggle more. You could have ended the life in your womb with a single word. Again, you choose the hard path and decided to save a life, nearly dying in the process. You befriended a fallen angel and a nameless one, with your kind heart and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You've been in my town a few short months, but already you are loved by all. Because of all this, I will help you, but you must promise never to lie to me again.
My eyes widened and I stuttered out, "What lie?"
The first time we met, you told me the demon was gone from your house.
The grocery store.
Yes.
How can you help me? A large smile and faraway look crossed his face.
Before I tell you that, first I must tell you a story. One you must promise to never tell another soul, or even those without souls.
I promise.
A long time ago, when my people first came to the New World, they brought with them their old gods. As it is with most things, with time, the old ways were lost. So, just as many of my people abandoned their gods abandoned them and went home, leaving my kind behind and forgotten. I am Otoroshi, but you may call me Mamoru. We were guardians of the shrines. Our jobs were to keep the wicked and the imprudent from our holy places. You see, the wicked have a certain smell which makes them easy to tell from the pure. Evil smells like chocolate. You laugh, but it's true. What is more tempting than chocolate?
What do the pure smell like?
I'd have to liken it to lilac and incense. Now don't interrupt. After I was abandoned by my god, I wandered. I met a nameless one, long before I knew of your Charlie. They smell of neither chocolate nor lilac. Their smell is different. It's like the smell of fresh snow on an early winter morning, just as the sun begins to rise. Your Charlie no longer smells like that. He has forgotten himself, forgotten who he is because of his lust for fear. You must remind him of this. Nameless ones are neither evil nor good. They are the only truly neutral beings I have ever met. Help Charlie overcome his addiction, and I am sure he will walk free from that house.
I could only stare in awe at him. He squeezed my shoulders.
You and the little one will be okay, sweet child. As for your stepfather,
his voice came out in a growl.
I shall keep my eyes out for that wicked soul.
He licked his lips greedily. As he climbed back into his towering jeep, he turned and looked at us.
Aren't you going to ask?
I stared at him dumbly for a minute. There were a million things I wanted to ask, but I was still trying to wrap my brain around what I had just learned. He laughed.
You and Rory smell of moonlit lilacs and whiffs of my favorite incense. The tiny one you carry, though, his scent is unique to him alone. It's the deep aroma of woodsy amber, touched with ice. I look forward to meeting the tiny one.
I took Rory to Missy's house before I headed home. I offered her $100 to keep him for the rest of the week. She refused the money and willingly took in Rory. I made the excuse that there were some things I wanted to do at the house, like paint, but I didn't want Rory around the fumes. I bought some paint on the way home because I felt guilty for lying. No one asked why my eyes were swollen and puffy, or why my face was tear-stained. It was a small mercy. I should have asked Mamoru for a ride, I grumbled to myself. I arrived home to find Luke and Charlie proudly displaying a crib. Judging from the size of the old box shoved to the side, I'd say they had spent the few hours I was gone building it. It was beautiful and definitely an antique. Guys, it's beautiful! Luke picked up and examined the paint can.
Sage green, huh? Is this for the baby's room?
He narrowed his twinkling eyes at me.
Or is it some kind of dig at us because you don't want us near the baby?
What do you mean? And yes, it'll be for the nursery. I fidgeted. It was going to be a lot harder to break the news to Charlie than I thought.
Sage.
Oh, that. No, I just like the color. Just because it's called sage doesn't mean it'll work like sage. I found myself getting annoyed. Just say it, Moira. Spit it out, like ripping off a Band-Aid. That's when I made the second of two very critical mistakes. The first was that I hadn't been paying that much attention to Charlie while Luke teased me about the paint. He had been silently watching me the whole time. The second mistake I made was stepping a foot into that house. The second I was across the threshold, Charlie pulled me to the middle of the room. It wasn't a pull like a normal person would do. It was more like 1 second I had just walked through the door, and the next I was in the middle of the room, squaring off with Charlie.
What's wrong, Moira?
He had a hand on each shoulder, but there was no static.
What's going on?
Luke called from the door. Just rip it off, just like a Band-Aid, 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 just spit it out! The book is gone! I'm so sorry, Charlie, but as soon as they started reading it, it turned to dust. His fingers dug into my shoulders. His eyes went black. I didn't know, and they said the script is permanent. But it's okay. Charlie, I think I know what to do. Charlie grew to twice his normal size. All claws and fangs, Charlie dripped with anger. The tips of his talons pierced the flesh of my shoulders. Warm blood dripped and pooled under the cloth of my shirt.
Charlie, let her go!
Cried Luke from the door. He snatched his hands from my shoulders and backhanded me. I slid across the room while Charlie boiled with rage. Luke went feral at the door, wings out, smashing against the barrier. Blood dripped from my busted lip and I could feel my eyes swelling.
You stupid, wretched human!
Charlie towered over me. Luke screamed threats and profanities from the door. Part of his wings charred from the force of trying to push himself through the barrier.
That's my child, Charlie. They belong to me if you hurt them.
I raised my hand to Charlie. You are a nameless one. It's the human fear you feed on that keeps you here. Charlie raised one clawed hand high into the air. This strike would rend my body. Charlie, please, listen to me. As his clawed wrath whistled through the air at me, there was a loud explosion and wood chips flew through the room. Luke screamed, "Fuck!" The world became encased in shadow. I looked up slowly. It really was a shadow. The claws of the massive blue paw beside me dug into the wood floors, gouging out a grip. I followed the paw up. Crouched protectively above me was a massive beast. Coarse blue hair covered his body. Long, wild black hair hung from his head. Huge tusks protruded from his snarling mouth. Charlie's dagger-sharp talons had pierced the beast deep in its shoulder. Plumes of hot breath came from the beast's wide nostrils. One colossal paw was wrapped around Charlie's face, holding him steadily in place.
Know thyself, nameless one. Remember who you really are.
The deep voice boomed from the beast above me. Mama Roo, I whimpered.